you go.
Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. Take two. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Infinite Learning's webinar today around counselling approaches for schools. My name is Rebecca Annand. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Infinite Learning. I'm joined here today with Isabel Barnes. She's our media and marketing manager. And of course by Naomi Russell from Minds Ahead, who's going to be delivering this webinar. I'm going to hand over to Izzy to really do all the introductions, and then to Naomi herself, of course. But just wanted to say for Infinite Learning a big welcome and thank you to Naomi for her time here today. It's interesting, isn't it, when we look at the target audience that we've put in place for this webinar and the subsequent course that we'll run, that more and more this is a topic that's relevant to everybody. So perhaps back in the day we would have our school counsellors, and it was really their role to deal with situations and students that required that level of support. And I think particularly during these times post-COVID, the safeguarding issues that surround that and the difficulties that we know young people are facing on a daily basis, really it's kind of the responsibility of every person that works with a child or a young person to have some basic understanding around counselling approaches. So we hope this is going to be a really popular programme. We know it's going to be incredibly useful, and I hope you find this webinar a good insight into what's to come. So do enjoy, and Naomi, thank you, and Izzy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. So we are delighted to be running this webinar today in partnership with Naomi Russell and Minds Ahead. And today we'll be speaking about counselling approaches in schools and the related course that we're running through Infinite Learning. This webinar will form a great foundation of understanding for counselling approaches in schools, understandably, and it will increase your understanding of how to handle tough situations within primary and secondary if you're a teacher, a leader, a Senko, etc., etc. So before I hand over to Naomi Russell, a few small areas of housekeeping. Attendees are automatically on listen-only mode. We will allow Naomi Russell to deliver her presentation in full and then have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So please feel free to use the Q&A chat area in the programme to ask any question at any point during the presentation. We'll use the last 10-15 minutes of the webinar to answer as many of these questions as possible. A video recording of this webinar will be sent to you along with a short webinar survey and a certificate of attendance. We'll be most grateful for your feedback. We will also send you a copy of the PowerPoint that Naomi has very, very kindly shared with us. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Naomi Russell. Over to you, Naomi.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to be here today. My name's Naomi. I am here in London, which is not very sunny today. You won't be surprised to hear. And I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to tell you a little bit about what you can expect on the Counselling Approaches for Schools course. I'm delighted to be running that course. Minds Ahead has been going since 2017, and our vision is to revolutionise mental health in schools and to support teachers and school staff to feel confident and well equipped to support the mental health of young people. And it's a real privilege to deliver this training, which will make a tangible difference to the lives of young people in your schools. So what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about what you can expect to learn on the course, but it's really only a taster. There'll be a lot more than this covered. This will just hopefully give you a bit of a sense of what you can expect and what to look forward to. So first of all, we'll spend some time exploring what counselling is and what it isn't, and what the difference is between formal counselling and using counselling skills. We'll spend some time looking at how to set up a safe space in a counselling or counselling skills setting. So creating the frame, in other words, the expectations, agreeing contracts, which are informal agreements with counselling students in your case, or clients in an adult setting, that help everybody to understand what the boundaries of the relationship are between the person who's delivering the counselling and the person who's receiving the counselling, what to expect, how often you'll meet, and any kind of safeguarding concerns or the boundaries around confidentiality, which is incredibly important to be clear in your role about what you can keep confidential and what you can't keep confidential. You'll probably be fairly aware of those types of issues already, but we'll clarify that a little bit more for counselling settings where they do differ slightly. Building safe relationships obviously is connected to what I was just saying. So looking at how do you create positive, nurturing, counselling type relationships without developing a dependency, if you like, or developing relationships that are really empowering and that are safe, are boundaried and useful. We'll spend some time looking at empathy and reflective listening skills. Now, all of us, no doubt, will be really good at providing empathy and will be really good at reflective listening, because if you work in education, that's a big part of your job already. And it's a basic human skill, isn't it? So there's no real magic there, but there are some key tools and tips and techniques that you can use that you might not be aware of, that we will go through in the course, that will help you just to really hone your reflective listening skills, so that you can really help the person that you're supporting, the young person that you're supporting, to really reflect and draw out their own solutions, because that's one of the most amazing and impactful elements of counselling, especially I think for young people who are very used to kind of being in positions where people tell them what to do. Counselling is an amazing space, or informal counselling, if it's not fully fledged counselling, is a great opportunity to support young people to come to their own conclusions and to find solutions to their problems and to develop their own confidence. And those are really skills that will set them up for life. We'll spend some time also on the course looking at understanding different mental health conditions. Again, this bit, I'm really keen for that to be kind of very flexible to what the needs and interests of the group are. There are a wide range of mental health conditions, and I can teach you about all of them. But I think what we will do is we'll see what the level of existing knowledge is within the group and which ones you want to focus on. So, for example, some people often have quite a good understanding of depression and anxiety, because those mental health conditions are more widely understood, but perhaps want to learn a little bit more about eating disorders or psychosis or borderline personality disorder. So there are a range of mental health conditions that we can look at, and that will, like I say, probably depend a little bit on what the group's particularly interested in. We will explore attachment theory, which you may or may not have heard of. Attachment theory is basically, in a nutshell, is the idea that having positive, supportive, accepting relationships with a key attachment figure or caring adult is hugely influential on a young person's life. That could be a parent, that could indeed be a teacher. So we're going to look at how attachment theory plays out and the impact that it has on young people, on all of us indeed, and particularly how, as a sort of counselling, or as a formal counsellor or a counselling type figure or a teacher that's providing pastoral support, you will likely become an attachment figure for a young person, and how you can manage that in a positive way that supports their development. We will also, you can see that we're going to cover a real lot in these couple of days, but my plan is that it will be really interactive, and it'll be a great chance for you to sort of grapple with different ideas and approaches and really develop an approach that's interesting to you, because this isn't a one-size-fits-all type subject. So we'll look a little bit at creative methodologies such as art and drama, and how you can use those methodologies in counselling sessions or counselling style sessions to help young people express themselves. And if you're someone that enjoys creative expression, then that might be a particular approach that speaks to you. We'll talk a little bit about neuroplasticity, which is the idea, which is a scientific understanding of the brain, and how the brain actually does evolve over the course of a lifetime, and how we can change our own brains, and how events affect the development of a young person's brain. So we'll learn a little bit about how that connects to sort of learning new behaviours and learning new patterns that are useful for us as coping mechanisms in our lives. We'll look at resilience as well, and there's an amazing I've forgotten the word I'm looking for, but essentially there's an amazing resource around resilience, which looks at all different aspects of resilience, because there are many, from emotional, behavioural, psychological, and in terms of the wider circumstance you find yourself in. Audit, that's the word I was looking for. So resilience audit resource, I'll share that with you, which enables you to look at all the different aspects of resilience and how they're affecting a young person. And that's actually a tool you can use directly with young people to help them identify the aspects of their lives that they're finding challenging and aspects of their lives which they're finding positive. And by going into that in a bit more detail, it really helps them to kind of set goals for themselves in terms of what you might want to work on together, and to look at building their resilience and the assets that they already have. We will also look at different approaches to counselling, or how you use counselling skills. So one, which is a personal favourite of mine, because I should tell you a little bit myself. I qualified as a psychotherapist. I studied at Regent's University in London, and I qualified in 2014. And I spent a number of years working with women who were affected by domestic violence, so providing person-centred counselling to them. And that was really meaningful and inspiring work. And I did that alongside, I've been working alongside schools and with school mental health projects for a good 10 years now as well. So I think the person-centred approach, which is the approach that I'm particularly specialised in, but my counselling training was also integrative. So I learned a lot about all different approaches, and I will introduce you to different approaches as well. And they're all useful in different ways. So the person-centred approach is really about creating a sort of environment where people can thrive and flourish and empower themselves to thrive and flourish. And it's quite an open approach. And I'll also teach you some CBT techniques, which are really useful. CBT is a more directive approach, and really, really useful for certain scenarios. If you want to work with a young person around a specific problem that's holding them back, helping them with some informal CBT techniques to kind of alter their thinking a little bit, to help them access their resilience a little bit more, to help them cope with certain situations is really powerful. So we'll look at that as well. Solution-focused questions relate to that. So that's for whether you're doing formal counselling or whether you're kind of just using your counselling skills, thinking about the art of questioning and how the questions that you use with a young person or with anyone can help solicit a constructive way forward for them. And crucially, and I think potentially almost the most important part, is that throughout the course, we'll be reflecting on our own current practice. So obviously, to share during the course, you'll heavily anonymize. We won't be talking about real life examples in a way that anyone could ever identify, but we will have the opportunity for you to kind of reflect on the work that you're doing in schools or your different settings, and think about how you could bring these skills to those settings and bring examples that you want to kind of think through together as a group. We'll also look at self-awareness and self-care, which is hugely important when you're kind of providing emotional space for young people, because that can often, and as I'm sure you've all already experienced, by supporting young people emotionally, you can sometimes take on some of the emotion that they're feeling, and that can kind of stay with you and affect you. So we're going to look at ways of how you manage that, how that happens, how you manage that, and what you can do to make sure that you can separate between what's happening for a young person and the emotions and feelings and difficulties that belong to them and what's happening for you. And utilising clinical supervision fits into that as well. So if you're in a position to have supervision or any kind of management support, we'll look at how do you use that in a way that's useful to you. So I've talked quite a lot about a lot of different components of the course. And I think most importantly to say that this course is going to be relevant if you're going to provide formal counselling in an education setting, but it's also going to be relevant, like was said in the introduction, and perhaps especially relevant to people who maybe aren't providing formal school counselling, but want to use counselling style skills when working with young people. Because, as has been said, when we're working with young people, we do take a holistic approach to their education, which involves thinking about their well-being, doesn't it? So if you want to use counselling style skills, this course will really help you to understand what some of those are and to have some of those tools at your fingertips. I'll make it as interactive as possible. And like I said, we'll definitely be keen to bring in your real life experience, your particular goals and objectives that you have from the course, so that you can come out of it getting what you want to from the course. So I hope that makes sense as a little introduction. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can just see the webinar forum again. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be really delighted to answer them. There's no such thing as a stupid question. I'm sure you all know that. Yeah, I'm here for any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Naomi. So whilst we wait for people to type in the chat box if they've got any questions, I actually have a few myself. So I'm not particularly counselling versed, but I'm very interested. Could you just elaborate on what CBT is and sort of what techniques there are involved in that?
Yeah, certainly. So CBT stands for, sorry, I should have said cognitive behavioural therapy. And it comes from the idea that our thoughts and our feelings and our actions are all interlinked and affect each other. So the way that we think can affect the way that we feel, which then goes on to affect the kind of choices we make in our behaviour. So if I have a certain belief or a thought in my head, that might trigger, and if it's a negative, let's say, belief or thought about myself, for example, if I think that I'm not good at maths, just to use a kind of simple example, if I have that belief or that thought, then that might affect how I feel, which I might start to get disheartened, I might start to feel low, I might start to feel demotivated and feel find things difficult in a maths lesson, for example, and that might then affect kind of my behavior and how it's a cycle. So CBT helps you to examine what your thoughts are that underlie your feelings and perhaps look at reframing them, because very often, particularly if we're in distress, our thoughts can be quite closed, can be quite I'm sure we've all experienced this when we have sort of quite fixed ideas about ourselves or about the world, and actually when they come under a little bit of gentle scrutiny, we find that actually if we can reframe our thoughts slightly, and maybe some of our thoughts weren't as definitively true as we thought they were, to use a little bit of a tongue twister there, if our thoughts aren't as true as we thought they were, then maybe we can reframe them in a way which will affect our emotions, which will obviously affect our mood and probably our behaviors too. So that CBT offers some tools and some questions that you can use with young people to help them understand. And it's a real, I would say it's a real gift to give someone, or a real gift to give a young person, if they perhaps for the first time are examining what their thoughts are and then giving them the power to consider changing their thoughts. Obviously, it's not always possible to do that, but sometimes it is. And that's a real gift to give someone if they recognize that kind of to an extent they are in charge of their brain rather than their brain being in charge of them.
I like that little ending bit. They're in charge of their brain's not in charge of them. I might have a little read up of CBT after this. You've got me interested now.
Great.
So we do have some questions. Paola wants to know is the course interactive?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interactive. So obviously today I've just been talking at you, but I don't intend to do that very much on the course. We've got a range of interactive slides. I think I mentioned that the section on different mental health conditions will kind of co-create and focus more on what's interesting to the group, but we'll definitely do that with other sections as well. So I hope to kind of have a bit of a sense of finding out what people's levels of knowledge and interests are at the beginning. And I'm very flexible. Like I say, I'm an experienced counsellor and school practitioner, and I'm really flexible to kind of be able to meet the needs of the group, I hope, and to address what areas of the topic particularly interest you. So it will be really flexible depending on who's there. And in terms of being interactive, some people, I try to get a balance, because I know that I think that we all have different learning styles, and some of our learning styles are more based on listening, sometimes based on doing, sometimes based on reading and speaking and so on. So I try to vary it for different learning styles, but I also know that some people love interactive activities and some, want to do them all the time, and some people don't. So I think it'll be a mixture, basically. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. It sounds like it's a bit more bespoke than, you know, just you talking at them. You kind of learn about them as they learn as well, which is quite useful.
Maybe I should add that, you know, because counselling is all about empowering people to find their own solutions and supporting someone to examine themselves and kind of their own needs and their situation. In a way, we'll try to model that through the course. So instead of me kind of teaching you this is the right answer, because it's not that straightforward, obviously, it'll be about, there will be times where I'll definitely have a lot of content to sort of teach you in a more formal way, but there'll also be elements where I'll be facilitating your self-reflection, so you have that experience that you can then kind of take forward in your setting.
Fantastic. So this course will be delivered at level 3, I believe, but not technically accredited at level 3. Can you just expand on that a little bit for me?
Sorry, I meant to mention. So we have run this course before. It's a really robust course, as hopefully you've had a sense from what I was talking about, the breadth that it covers. So this is not an introductory course, although it is fine if you've never done anything about counselling. I mean, I think because if you work in an education setting, you have some understanding of pastoral work, and you've probably been doing more using informal counselling skills than you maybe even realise. But it is a robust, it is a in-depth, as much as you can be in-depth in a couple of days, introduction to a broad range of elements of using counselling skills. So by the end, you will really be able to kind of to say that you've confidently had a full, significant introduction, which is equivalent to a level 3 qualification, if that makes sense. So yeah, like I say, it'll be very broad in terms of covering theory, in terms of covering practical sort of practical application of the skills, and also looking at kind of yourself and how you might apply this to your setting. So it is quite it's rigorous, but hopefully good fun.
Well, just one more question from me whilst I wait and see if there's anyone else who has any more questions. Well, less of a question, more of a statement. I think you said that on this course you sort of learn about the kind of work-life balance as well. So when you're counselling someone at school, you learn to sort of segment it into school and not take it personally and take it home. How important do you think that separation is when it comes to counselling?
That's such a great question, and I think it's essential, and it's kind of an ongoing professional challenge in a way, which I'm sure all of you working in education already have experienced. You know, there will be young people whose situation has probably affected you, or there will be elements of your work life that you take home, literally in terms of having to work out of hours, but also in terms of perhaps the toll that sometimes it takes to do this really important work. So I think it is really essential to look at self-care. It's really essential, not just for yourself, although most importantly for yourself, but also for the young people you're trying to help. Because sometimes, it's like, I think doctors kind of swear that they'll do no harm first. First of all, is do no harm, even when we don't intend to do harm. Sometimes if our own feelings and emotions get clouded and mixed with what's going on for the person we're trying to help, we don't intend to do harm, we intend to do good, particularly because many of us in this field have a real desire to kind of fix things. You know, if we hear about something difficult, we just want to help and we want to fix it and we want to make it better. And that comes from a really good place. And it comes from the fact that, you know, it's difficult to hear about people's pain, but we can't always fix it. And often it's not our job to fix it, but actually just sitting alongside someone and hearing it, even if they're a child, just being there for them and listening makes a massive difference. So we have to kind of work on our own desire to fix things and our own how we let go, so that we don't end up kind of clouding the waters and making things more complicated for the people we're trying to help by adding the intensity of our own feelings, but also equally importantly, looking after ourselves so that we can achieve that work-life balance. Because ultimately, to cut a long story short, when you're working in mental health, your own mental health comes first, because we're modeling. Also, it's about modeling to young people what it is to take care of your mental health. So if we're not taking care of our own mental health, then we're kind of undermining what we're trying to do. So yeah, I think it's essential.
I completely agree. It's so important. So we have no more questions in the chat, so I will just wrap up now. Actually, about concludes our webinar for today. So thank you very much to Naomi for sharing your passion, knowledge and expertise with us. And thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today. If you have any questions that weren't answered, or if you would like any further advice on counselling approaches in schools and the training that's involved, please do not hesitate to get in touch, and we will be more than happy to assist. A reminder that a video recording of this webinar will be sent to you today, along with a short webinar survey and a certificate of attendance, and we'll be most grateful for your feedback. We will also send you a PDF of the PowerPoint that Naomi has very, very kindly shared with us. Starting on the 21st of March, we are running the related Counselling Approaches for Schools course, which you can find on our e-learning page at www.infinitelearning.ae. So please feel free to check out the course on there and any of our other various courses. Thank you very much, Naomi, and I will stop the recording now.